The husband who tricked everyone, including the FBI, for many young girls, the idea of meeting their soulmate, eloping, and experiencing a whirlwind marriage is a cherished dream. Caroline Crouch, a 15-year-old high school student, was no exception. She was swept off her feet by a 27-year-old pilot, affluent and charming, who often flew his helicopter over her school. Captivated by his attention, Caroline eloped with him, and they soon married. However, what started as a romantic fairy tale quickly descended into a tragic nightmare. On the early morning of Tuesday, May 11th, 2021, at approximately 4:30 a.m., a man named Haralambos Anopolis, also known as Babis, experienced a horrific awakening in his two-story maisonette in Glicka, a suburb on the outskirts of Athens, Greece. With little chance to react, Babis was swiftly overpowered by three masked intruders. Brandishing pistols, they tied him up and blindfolded him using duct tape. The commotion also woke their 11-month-old daughter, sleeping nearby. Speaking with distinct Greek and Albanian accents, the invaders demanded to know where the money was kept. Unbeknownst to Caroline, this supposed robbery was about to escalate into a deadly confrontation. Caroline Crunchka, only 19 years old at the time, faced unimaginable terror. Born on July 12, 2001, in Athens to a retired engineer, David Crouch and Susan Della Costa, Caroline had moved at the age of 8 to Alonissos, an island where she spent her formative years. Her parents, enchanted by the island's coastal charm, had relocated there. From a young age, Caroline thrived in her seaside environment, developing a passion for scuba diving and swimming. Caroline first met her future husband, Babis, during a Good Friday parade in 2017. At that time, Babis was working as a commercial helicopter pilot, and Caroline was just 15 years old. 3 years after their first encounter, the couple married in Portugal on July 15, 2019. Shortly before Caroline's tragic demise, she and Babis had invested in a plot of land, envisioning it as the site for their future dream home, a sanctuary for themselves and their young daughter. To finance the land purchase, Caroline had received 50,000 euros from her parents as a gift. As for the building expenses, the couple had discreetly saved around 10,000 euros within their home. At the time, many Greeks distrusted banks due to ongoing financial instability, making it commonplace for people to keep substantial cash reserves at home, perceived as a safer alternative. This perspective likely influenced Caroline's decision to store their savings in such a manner, never foreseeing the dreadful events that would unfold on May 11th. When the intruders stormed their home, demanding to know the whereabouts of the money, a terrified Babis and Caroline, along with their daughter, were plunged into despair. In a desperate bid to end their nightmare, Babis revealed the unlikely hiding spot, a Monopoly board game box, where they had tucked away the funds intended for their dream home. However, the intrusion didn't cease with the discovery of the money. The burglars continued their rampage, scouring each room and pilfering jewelry and other valuable items. Having relinquished all they possessed, Babis and Caroline, overwhelmed by fear and desperation, pleaded for their lives and their daughter's safety. Throughout this harrowing ordeal, Babis, though blindfolded, struggled valiantly against his bindings. He was periodically choked to the point of losing consciousness, slipping in and out of awareness until he finally passed out, only to come to his senses later. Once Babis regained consciousness, he realized that the intruders had fled the premises. The only sound that filled the tense silence were the agonizing cries of his infant daughter. After struggling for about 30 minutes, Babis managed to maneuver himself close enough to his mobile phone to dial emergency services using his nose. Despite the duct tape covering his mouth, which muffled his speech, he urgently pleaded for help upon connecting with the operator, requesting an ambulance and providing his location. The emergency call was challenging, with Babis only able to utter fragmented sentences like "robbers came in" to describe the horror that had unfolded. It had been approximately an hour and a half since the criminals had invaded their home. First responders arrived at the grisly scene around 6 a.m., rushing up the front steps into the house. What they encountered was nothing short of devastating. The living area and kitchen were in shambles. Drawers lay open and empty, clothes and other personal items strewn about haphazardly. Among the chaos, they spotted the open Monopoly box, the same one where Babis and Caroline had hidden their savings. Additionally, a security camera was found on the living room couch, seemingly torn from the walls, its memory card conspicuously missing. Most heartbreakingly, from the staircase dangled the lifeless body of a white and brown husky puppy, tragically strangled with her own leash. In the main bedroom, Babis was discovered on the floor, his eyes and mouth sealed with duct tape extending to his neck, and his limbs bound behind his back. Nearby, on the bed, lay Caroline Crouch, face down and unresponsive. Their infant daughter, beside her mother on the bed, was crying and clapping her hands, naively trying to awaken her. Caroline was declared dead at the scene. Though their daughter showed signs of distress, she was physically unharmed. Observing Caroline's pale complexion, first responders quickly surmised that she had been murdered. When Babis was released from his bindings and confronted with his wife's lifeless body, he was overtaken by shock, devastated by the loss of the woman he had loved for the past 5 years. Police immediately secured the safety of the infant and began questioning Babis. From his account and the disarray of the crime scene, investigators pieced together the involvement of 4 individuals, 3 who entered the home and 1 who kept watch outside. The sequence of events, as reconstructed by the police, began with the intruders arriving via a dirt road that led to the house's rear. Unable to force entry through the rear door, they removed the security pins from a basement window to gain access. Once inside, they encountered Roxy, the family's 7-month-old husky, and tragically ended her life using her own leash as a weapon. The assailants then proceeded to the main bedroom, where Babis and Caroline were sleeping. After causing extensive damage throughout the house and retrieving the hidden money from the Monopoly box, they smothered Caroline with a pillow, believing it to be a conclusive act. Assuming Babis had also perished, given his sporadic consciousness, the attackers departed, thinking they had eliminated any potential witnesses. Further examination revealed that Caroline's death was a prolonged ordeal, lasting approximately 6 minutes. The presence of bruises across her body indicated she fought back during the attack, and additional marks on her lips and tongue suggested the use of sharp objects during the fatal assault. Despite the immense damage inflicted upon the couple's house, no signs of sexual assault were found, and concrete evidence left by the intruders was scant. However, a crucial clue emerged when first responders discovered the hood of one of the intruders, believed to have fallen off as Babis fought back. This minor yet significant piece of evidence allowed Babis a brief glimpse of one of his assailants. Based on his description, a sketch was created depicting an overweight, dark-skinned, tall individual. Babis, despite his disoriented state, also managed to identify 2 firearms used by the attackers, a black pistol and a silver Colt. The investigation revealed that the intruders made off with 10,000 euros in cash and various pieces of jewelry, leading police to conclude that the crime was the work of professional criminals who had likely surveilled the family and timed their attack meticulously. A police spokesperson described the crime as brutal and violent, indicative of individuals with a lack of emotions and strong antisocial personalities. As the investigation unfolded, numerous theories and speculations arose. A prevailing question was why murder was deemed necessary if robbery was the primary motive. Some speculated that the intruders were under the influence of drugs, impairing their ability to control their actions, or that Caroline might have recognized them. Given Caroline's training as a black belt kickboxer, it was theorized that she resisted fiercely, prompting the intruders to silence her to maintain control. Another speculation suggested that alarms were raised when Caroline began to scream as one of the intruders pointed a gun at their 11-month-old daughter's temple. While these remained speculations, investigators were certain of one aspect: the attack was premeditated, evidenced by the intruders' knowledge of the hidden money. This led the police to scrutinize Babis and Caroline's inner circle closely, searching for any possible connections to the crime. The police developed a theory that the gang responsible for the murder might have been tipped off. As part of their investigation, officers reviewed security camera footage from nearby homes and businesses. In these recordings, they spotted a dark-colored vehicle and a motorcycle lurking around the couple's house on the morning of the murder. Caroline Crouch was mourned and laid to rest 3 days following the tragedy. Her final resting place was on the Greek island of Alanissos, where she had spent her childhood and where her parents had found their own paradise. During the funeral, Babis paid heartfelt tribute to Caroline, expressing his fortune in having known and loved her and gratitude for her being the mother of his daughter. He lamented that their daughter would grow up without memories of her mother, but assured that Caroline's spirit would live on through their child. Meanwhile, as Caroline was being buried, police in northeast Greece made a routine traffic stop that would unexpectedly connect to her case. The driver, a 36-year-old Georgian national named Georgi Haradishvili, was en route to the Bulgarian border. Initially, he presented a passport, which was quickly identified as counterfeit. This man, revealed to be a violent criminal with multiple prior convictions, was wanted for a dozen burglaries committed across Athens in the last 6 months. Notably, 3 of these incidents had occurred near Babis and Caroline's neighborhood. One particularly violent break-in in December mirrored the method used in the assault on Babis and Caroline: entry through a rear window, followed by brutal tactics, including dragging a woman by the hair and threatening her life. During this crime, Haradishvili and his accomplices had stolen 10,000 euros in cash and jewelry. The pattern of these crimes and their proximity to Babis and Caroline's home led investigators to suspect Haradishvili's involvement in the fatal robbery, marking him as a prime suspect in the ongoing investigation. If mere patterns were not sufficient to implicate Haradishvili in the murder, his striking resemblance to the suspect's sketch, drawn from Babis's description of one of the intruders, added to the suspicions. Coupled with his history of violent break-ins, his attempted flight from the country, and his match with the sketch, the police were initially convinced they had apprehended the right man. Haradishvili underwent a rigorous 4-day interrogation, during which he endured harsh methods that eventually resulted in a concussion. Despite this, he maintained his innocence, asserting he had never even heard of Caroline Crouch. Eventually, the evidence against him proved insufficient, and Haradishvili was exonerated, leading to the demotion of 3 officers from the Athens homicide squad due to their handling of the situation. With Haradishvili cleared, attention shifted to a local Albanian organized crime group. The police initially considered a broad list of 100 suspects, which was subsequently narrowed down to 10 individuals on a notorious criminal list known as the Red List. Babis was shown mugshots of these suspects, but the police kept other details confidential. As the investigation dragged on, public patience waned, particularly as racially motivated crimes in the area were on the rise. The scarcity of solid leads in Caroline's case was so pronounced that a substantial monetary reward remained unclaimed. The atmosphere in Athens grew tense, with residents fearful of becoming the next victims. Media outlets at the time quoted experts who remarked on the unusual complexity of the case, suggesting that a typical investigation would have reached a conclusion much sooner. Among the few details that were publicly shared, it was noted that no DNA or fingerprints were found at the crime scene. Throughout this prolonged quest for justice, Caroline's family expressed their gratitude for the continued efforts, while Babis conveyed to journalists his hope that no one else would ever have to endure such a tragedy. Babis continued to support police efforts and remained active in the media to keep Caroline's case in the public eye. He also engaged with the public on social media, answering questions and expressing gratitude for the ongoing support. A significant breakthrough occurred on June 17th, 37 days after Caroline's brutal murder, during a small memorial service held for her on Alanisos. Detectives attending the service waited until the conclusion of the event before discreetly approaching Babis, requesting his presence in Athens to potentially identify a suspect. Unaware of what awaited him, Babis agreed to accompany them. Investigators had been diligently following leads and analyzing discrepancies in the details Babis had provided about the night Caroline was killed. Babis had initially told police that the intruders entered through a basement window, but this window was notably small and seemed an unlikely entry point given the described physique of the supposed killer. Additionally, Babis claimed that the house was extensively trashed during the incident, yet neighbors reported only hearing the sounds of the couple's puppy in distress, with no indications of a violent intrusion or disturbances like a house being ransacked, calls for help, or a crying infant. Moreover, there were no fingerprints or DNA evidence found in the house. Questions arose about why intruders would tie up a male and confront a female so aggressively. Babis also mentioned that the intruders had removed the memory card from the living room security camera, but data from the camera indicated that the card was removed at 1:20 a.m., hours before the supposed entry of the intruders. Additionally, Caroline was wearing a smartwatch that monitored her pulse. Data from the watch showed her pulse was normal at 3:58 a.m., suggesting she was asleep, but it spiked by 50% at 4 a.m., indicating severe stress. By 4:11 a.m., the readings showed her heart had stopped, earlier than the time Babis had claimed the murder occurred. On the other hand, Babis had a fitness app on his smartphone, which showed that he was moving around at the time he claimed to be tied up. The police even tried to recreate him dialing emergency services with his phone while bound, but no one could manage it. Further investigations revealed that Caroline had tried to book a hotel for herself and her daughter on the night she was killed. A text message she sent to a friend indicated she was considering leaving Babis. Babis first met Caroline while on vacation in Alanisos, where his mother, a teacher at Caroline's school, lived. Babis was charming, smart, and financially well off. He captured Caroline's attention by flying a helicopter over her school, fulfilling a dream many young girls might have. However, for Caroline, this dream would soon turn into a nightmare. She believed they were a perfect match and confidently shared her happiness with her family. Babis proposed to Caroline after a year and a half of dating. At the time, Caroline was still underage, but she turned 18 3 days later. The couple got married and settled in Glicka. During the early years of their marriage, Caroline attended college in Athens, and Babis continued his work as a pilot. They both were active on social media, portraying a joyful and romantic relationship. However, the reality, as written in Caroline's diary, told a different story. In 2019, she wrote about a serious fight they had, expressing doubts about continuing the relationship and considering leaving to stay with her sister. Over time, Babis became increasingly controlling and manipulative. This problematic behavior traced back to their unconventional wedding. Instead of a traditional Greek celebration with family and friends, Babis and Caroline eloped. What seemed like a romantic gesture was actually Babis's attempt to isolate her. This pattern of isolation continued when they returned home. Babis was the sole breadwinner, while Caroline, a university student, had little money of her own. Caroline's mother, Susan, would send money, but Babis often took control of it. Caroline expressed in her diary, "I love Babis so much that I can't leave him, even though this relationship hurts me." Her diary also revealed a tearful confrontation where she expressed a desire to leave Babis. However, her pregnancy made her stay, as she wrote, "I stayed with him so my daughter would not grow up without her two parents." Another entry from July 2020 read, "Today my little one is a month old. It's also the day I told Babis I want to leave. I feel awful." She also mentioned a house in Athens in Halandri, marking a stark contrast from what started as a fairy tale to a deepening abyss of pain, horror, despair, and estrangement, an abyss she felt unable to escape. Hours before her murder, phone records showed argumentative and heated texts between Caroline and Babis, highlighting the growing distance and dysfunction in their relationship. With this mounting evidence, investigators informed Babis that he was now the prime suspect. They presented him with overwhelming and irrefutable evidence that contradicted the initial details he had provided about the events. This problematic behavior traced back to their unconventional wedding. Instead of a traditional Greek celebration with family and friends, Babis and Caroline eloped. What seemed like a romantic gesture was actually Babis's attempt to isolate her. This pattern of isolation continued when they returned home. Babis was the sole breadwinner, while Caroline, a university student, had little money of her own. Caroline's mother, Susan, would send money, but Babis often took control of it. Caroline expressed in her diary, "I love Babis so much that I can't leave him, even though this relationship hurts me." Her diary also revealed a tearful confrontation where she expressed a desire to leave Babis. However, her pregnancy made her stay, as she wrote, "I stayed with him so my daughter would not grow up without her two parents." Another entry from July 2020 read, "Today my little one is a month old. It's also the day I told Babis I want to leave. I feel awful." She also mentioned a house in Athens in Halandri, marking a stark contrast from what started as a fairy tale to a deepening abyss of pain, horror, despair, and estrangement, an abyss she felt unable to escape. Hours before her murder, phone records showed argumentative and heated texts between Caroline and Babis, highlighting the growing distance and dysfunction in their relationship. With this mounting evidence, investigators informed Babis that he was now the prime suspect. They presented him with overwhelming and irrefutable evidence that contradicted the initial details he had provided about the events. After 8 hours of intense questioning, Babis finally broke down. His confession, however, was laced with fabrications. He claimed that he and Caroline had started arguing on May 10th, the night before her murder, primarily over their daughter, whom Caroline intended to take with her as she left him. This, Babis said, caused him to lose control, as he viewed the child as his entire world. He described that night further, alleging that Caroline had thrown their infant into the cot and demanded he leave the house. He also accused Caroline of resorting to physical violence first, claiming she pushed and punched him, which clouded his judgment. In a fit of rage, Babis confessed to strangling her, pressing a pillow on her face with his full body weight, and ultimately killing her, a cold-blooded act committed in front of their 11-month-old daughter. He contemplated disposing of Caroline's body, but realized it was impractical. Instead, he concocted a plan to stage a home invasion. To make the scenario believable, he even killed their dog, Roxy, placed his child next to Caroline's corpse, and tied himself up with rope and duct tape. He admitted he deserved punishment and owed a significant apology to everyone he had hurt. While admitting his actions were indefensible, Babis still attempted to shift some blame to Caroline, claiming he had become unstable and aggressive only after their disputes over their daughter, a child who would now grow up motherless, never knowing the woman who was brutally murdered by the man she once loved. The case was later known as the murder that fooled the world. Babis had been so sure of his ability to evade capture that he neglected to destroy crucial evidence. In May 2022, he was charged and found guilty of premeditated murder, obstructing justice, lying to authorities, and animal cruelty. If you found this video shocking and informative, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Watching the full video helps us create more content like this. Let's keep the discussion going in the comments below. Share your thoughts. Thanks for watching.